Let's talk about this with Hans Kristensen. He joins me from Washington. Hans is the director of the Nuclear Information Project for the Federation of American Scientists. Hans, welcome to you.
Thanks very much for having me.
How concerned are you about that nuclear arsenal?
It's pretty serious. Not only do we have a base that's less than 100 miles from the border to Syria, the country completely devastated by war, but now we have a new situation where the country, the military forces of the country that the base is located in, military forces have been split down the middle, so to speak, because of a coup. So this raises fundamental questions, and the last we saw was that the Turkish base commander, one of the most important U.S. contact people into the Turkish military on that base, was arrested and led away together with 10 other people. So this goes right into the heart of the U.S. nuclear storage site.
Yeah, he was arrested Sunday, almost immediately after the coup had failed, or it was made clear that the coup had failed. Let's talk about what's in that base.
Well, it's a base that is considered an American base in terms of operations. There's an American base unit there that keeps control of it. But the unique part of the base is that it has a large storage system where something in the order of 20 shelters have underground nuclear weapons storage facilities. And we estimate that there is an order of 50 nuclear bombs stored on the base right now.
What kind of bombs?
These are thermonuclear weapons that have maximum yields of from 50 to 170 kiloton. And put things in perspective, the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima back in 1945 was 15 kilotons. So these are very, very powerful weapons.
Yeah, they're B-61, as I understand it. They're called the B-61?
That's correct. That's the title of the weapons.
All right. Okay. So there's as I understand it also, it's the largest storage facility, the largest of NATO's stockpile.
In Europe, yes.
In Europe.
It's part of a unique deployment that the United States has in Europe. It deploys nuclear bombs at 6 bases in 5 countries, and the Incirlik base in Turkey is one of them. This is an old arrangement that goes way back to the late 1950s, early 1960s. It was a Cold War arrangement, but it has been allowed to sort of linger on because NATO hasn't really been able to figure out what to do with it and how to move on. So, yes, it is the largest single concentration of nuclear bombs in Europe.
Mm-hmm. And so it was designed to protect Western interests against perceived Russian threats.
Yes, and protect Turkey, obviously, as against a Soviet attack as well. Okay. In the days when it was deployed first, NATO was in a different situation. The Soviet Union was seen to have at the time, a large conventional army that NATO could not hold back against of an attack, and so therefore NATO compensated by deploying nuclear weapons into Europe. Since then, things have changed fundamentally. The Soviet Union is no more, no matter what people might think about the current regime in Russia.
Right.
It's a very, very different situation. And today, it's NATO that has the overwhelming conventional superiority in Europe. So the conditions for deploying those weapons in Europe, and in my view, are completely different today.
So do you think they should stay there?
No, absolutely not. I think, turn it around. If there were no nuclear weapons today, and anybody asked the Pentagon, under the current conditions in Turkey, would you like to deploy nuclear weapons in the country? I think there would be a resounding no. They would never deploy nuclear weapons in Turkey under the current conditions.
Do you think they should ship them out?
Absolutely. They have to go back to the United States. Even if you remove the nuclear weapons from Turkey, it does not mean that the United States no longer have military forces or even nuclear forces in Europe. They're in several other locations. And just because one country pulls out does not mean that all the others will want to pull out as well. We had a situation a few years ago in 2001 when another country that had nuclear weapons on its territory, Greece, decided no longer and pulled out of that. That didn't mean that the rest of the alliance fell apart.
Hans, what's your worst fear here?
Well, the worst fear is that somebody can force their way into the base and create havoc, and that we have a situation where the control of U.S. nuclear weapons is lost, or that the weapons are physically destroyed.
But
this can happen in all sorts of ways. Every time we have these situations, we hear reassurances from military officials that it's very safe and no reason to fear this and that. But accidents and incidents have a nasty way of happening in ways that we do not anticipate. We've seen this again and again. And so this is just not an appropriate location to have nuclear weapons.
Isn't there a way, I mean, maybe I'm being completely naive here, I'm not a scientist in any way, but is there a way to, I mean, when the coup was going on, or the attempted coup was going on, as I understand it, the Americans or the NATO, someone was cutting the power to that particular part of the base.
Yes, the power flow from outside the base into the base was cut off. And I'm not sure if it has been completely restored yet, by the way. But the military facilities on all military bases, they have backup systems, and they're supposed to be able to operate even if outside energy is cut off.
Okay.
And so that's the situation right now at Incirlik. It's using its backup power system.
And is there any way to render the weapons themselves obsolete so that they don't get into the, or they're not usable in the wrong hands?
The weapons have special locks on them, electronic locks. So someone who's not authorized to use the weapons cannot go in and steal the weapon and then put it on an airplane and drop it somewhere. It won't work. It has to get the right kind of code, et cetera, et cetera. The fear here is not that someone will steal the weapon and use it. The fear is that some kind of incident or accident will happen in the base that spins out of control, where you lose control of the nuclear weapons. You know, people can steal these weapons if they can get to them and remove the fissile material from them and use them to build sort of crude nuclear devices. But it's not a fear of a nuclear explosion. It's more the fear of loss of the control of nuclear weapons.